Time once again for another edition of the Kaufman Corner podcast with you, the good Dr. Rany Jazayerli, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus, of course, former author of Rany on the Royals. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, and the World Series is in the books. What can the Kansas City Royals learn from this World Series? What do they need to be taking away from it, right? There's always lessons to be learned from the World Series as far as I'm concerned, so we'll talk about what the Royals are going to take away from both the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. Where are the Royals already World Series caliber? We asked that question. Who should the Royals be looking at locking up long-term, signing? We'll talk about that. And also, guess what? The good doctor's going to fantasy camp. He's going to be shagging fly balls. What the hell got into him? We'll talk about that here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to the Kaufman Corner podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and a former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. And now, here are your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. We're off and running here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. We're going to be on tape next week because Rany will be hitting bombs. Randy's talked about a minimum of 4 dingers at fantasy camp he expects to hit. We'll get into that a little bit later.
If you hit the ball over the infield, does that count as a dinger? Because
sure.
In that case, then maybe.
At your age, yeah, you bet.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's exciting news. I'm very excited, especially since I have multiple spies will be there that will report back to me on how you're looking. So I can't wait for that. Rany, let's start though with the classic, the Fall Classic. A World Series is complete. The Dodgers take it in 7. Did you come away with anything thinking these are the lessons that the Royals should be learning from these two ball clubs?
Well, I think the first lesson we all should learn is that sports are pain, Soren. Because if you are a Blue Jays fan right now, then you have my deepest condolences. This is the nature of sports. When there's a winner, there's a loser. And when there's a winner in one of the 10 best baseball games ever played, one of the 5 best World Series Game 7s ever, there's also a loser in that game. And, once a decade, there's a team that gets this close to a championship, goes to the 9th inning, 3 outs away from a title, and doesn't get it. So for the Blue Jays fans, like the 2011 Rangers, like the 86 Red Sox, I suppose you could throw the 2001 Yankees in there, but I don't, because screw the Yankees. But there are teams that come that close. And
how about the 2014 Royals?
The 2014 Royals never led in Game 7.
Okay.
We came very close. Like, I was there that night, and I look back at that. Yes, there's a what if because they were one swing away. Salvador Perez is one of the few players in Major League history who came to the plate with a chance to hit a walk-off home run with his team behind in Game 7 of the World Series, much like, I suppose, Addison Barger and Alejandro Kirk did yesterday. There are a few players who can say that, but they didn't actually lead in the 9th inning like the Blue Jays did. So that's a special kind of pain. And for all the Royals have had their share of playoff failures, and I'm fortunately too young to remember the 77 Royals or the 76 Royals, but especially the 77 Royals who were in that position in the ALCS, not the World Series. But I know how, some certain Royals fans of a certain age, that still lingers with them. This is going to linger for the Blue Jays fans for a long time. So yeah, we haven't had as much success as some teams, but I'm just a little bit thankful right now that you won't have that kind of a loss stick in your craw for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Start with that. Like, it's baseball. It's a great sport precisely because it can be so painful at times. And right now, there's a whole fan base, a whole country that's hurting right now.
Yeah, no, I get it, and it is rough. I'll give you one of the perspectives that jumped out at me, and I know there's one thing you and I chatted before we got started about, like, one of the major storylines coming out of this World Series is salary cap. That now the Dodgers have won 2 in a row. By the way, only the 3rd National League team to have won back-to-back World Series. You got to go back to like the 20s since a National League team did it.
It's them. It's the Reds, the Big Red Machine in the 70s.
Oh, yeah, that's right, the Reds. And then the 20s.
Then, yeah, I couldn't believe it was like the 20s. I mean, the Yankees, they've won 5 in a row and 4 in a row and 3 in a row, but no National League team had won 2 in a row.
Blue Jays have won back-to-back.
Right.
But yeah, that was pretty amazing to see there. But people are talking about the salary cap, so let's take that off the board here first, because you, shockingly, as a Royals fan, are not for a salary cap. I'm for a salary cap, and I think this added ammunition, good, bad, right, or wrong, for it, and I think this will embolden many owners of teams that are not named the Dodgers or Mets or Yankees. Maybe not even the Yankees. I mean, the Yankees are chirping salary cap right now, right? Because I think they're greedy. They liked making gobs of profit, and the Dodgers are like, yeah, you know what? We're all rich. We're good. We'll pour more of it back into the team, and they're going way into the luxury tax to do it. But I think this does, whether it pushes them all the way to a salary cap, I think it pushes us closer to at least the fight for a salary cap. Would you agree with that?
I think you're right. I think people are, ownership, but also large, portions of the MLB fan base are looking for reasons to push a salary cap. And yes, on paper, it's very easy to point to, well, the Dodgers have spent more money than God the last 2 years, and they've won back-to-back championships. But I think it's such a simplistic way to look at it, because as we just mentioned, like, a butterfly flaps its wings at any of like 10 different points in the game last night. And we're talking about the Toronto Blue Jays winning the World Series and not the Dodgers. So, the margins are so slim. And, yes, those margins, you could say, well, the Dodgers paid their way to overcome those margins because they had someone like, Yamamoto being able to come in to pitch in extra innings and save the game for them. And, he's on a $325 million contract. But that game was won because, Isaiah Falefa didn't have a long enough lead off of third base in the bottom of the 9th inning. Because, Andy Pages, who's making major league minimum, tackles his own left fielder and still manages to hold on to the ball in the bottom of the 9th. Like, the margins in this game were so minuscule. I think reading too much into the Dodgers winning is dangerous. But I think in the bigger perspective here, you just kind of pointed it out. Like, the problem to me with the salary cap is the Dodgers, to me, aren't the problem because they're spending money. Like, what's wrong with that? You just said
they are and they aren't.
They have the money, but the point is the Yankees have the money too. Like, the notion that's like, what bothers me is that anytime a team just doesn't, like, an owner just feels like not spending money, he starts whining about some other team that's spending money. And to me, it's extremely rich to hear the New York freaking Yankees, a Steinbrenner, whining about how they can't compete anymore because, well, the sport needs a salary cap because they can't compete with the Dodgers. Hell yes, you can. You choose not to. All right. So, look, all credit to Dodgers ownership for being like, you know what? We are rich. I would rather be rich and a world champion than a little bit richer and not a world champion. Like, if you buy a baseball team, you should at least on some level buy a baseball team because you want to win. And when I look at a team like let's flip it to the other side of the market size, the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pirates ownership, they could spend more money. They get more money in revenue sharing than they spend on payroll. Like, they're basically guaranteed a profit before the games even begin because they're so damn cheap. That's an owner that hey, if I win, great, but I don't really care about winning. It's not a priority. That to me is a big part of the problem. So if you're going to push a salary cap without mechanisms in place to make sure that all teams are trying, and of course, a salary cap, if you're going to cap it on the high end, you've got to do something.
Yeah, you have a floor.
for
They all come
teams,
with it.
right?
That's the part of it, is that there will be a floor that is there as well. And so,
And I wonder though if there'll be a fight over that, because you have so many cheap ass owners
sure,
who will actually be rather pissed off. So this reminds me of the where we were when we had the enormous and destructive strike in the 90s, 30 years ago, which is that in essence, there was a fight between owners about how to spend money, and they were trying to get the players to basically make up the money that they were fighting about. Like the fight was, the small market owners were trying to get more money from the big market owners. The big market owners tried to put that on the players, and you ended up with the worst work stoppage in American sports history. That's what I worry about, is that the players are going to be scapegoated here for what is a fight between the big market owners who are like, I mean, the Dodgers are very happy with the way things are, but I'm sure the Yankees would like to save money, and I'm sure the Pirates don't want to spend more money. And if they try and make the players pay for that shortfall, we could have another really destructive work stoppage without actually solving anything.
Well, and I think that's where the fight is amongst the owners. I agree with you on that, and we'll probably save this for a bigger conversation, because we do want to talk about the actual baseball that was played in the World Series as well. But I think that with the fight amongst the owners will eventually, to me, needs to be about like breaking up New York and LA. Like, to me, they need to be expanding baseball and putting more teams in New York and LA to divvy up that market. And if everybody else is on board, now that's where you'd get the Yankees to line up with the Dodgers. Oh no, you bought your team. It was what it was. I know we're not talking about taking away your team or anyone else's team. We're just talking about putting our expansion teams and getting us, collectively checks for $3 and $4 and $5 billion every time we expand, that we all get free money that we don't have to do anything with, just to let people into the club. Then we're going to divvy up your market. That's exactly what we're going to do. Just like, the other, the biggest, most successful global sport, soccer, does. There are numerous teams in London in the EPL, right? And it works just fine. They're all making gobs of money as well. And so I'm with you. I mean, I think there's a much bigger conversation to be had about, like, are they really doing the revenue? Like, forget about revenue sharing or luxury taxes. Chop up those markets. Like, that's how you'll bring some level play to it. I think you can do that with a salary cap, but we'll talk more about that on down the road. But where do you sit, like, when you look at this comes, like, one of the things that jumps at me, I'll say this: the Dodgers won, but are a very incomplete team for as much money as they spent. Like, that jumped at me, that the Blue Jays were a more complete team, and that's what kept them in this. Because I know Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is a star. He sucked the first half of the year, so he was not Shohei Ohtani this year. I know he's red hot now, but he's not Shohei Ohtani. But they are a more complete team, right? And they had a star caliber player. But I am kind of surprised at how incomplete the Dodgers were in winning this World Series.
Yeah, it's funny because when you propose that we kind of look at each of these World Series teams and figure out what lessons the Royals can learn from them, there's not a lot to learn from the Dodgers, because so much of what the Dodgers did is, after just arguing about whether or not we need a salary cap or not, it's like they just spent ungodly amounts of money on Shohei Ohtani and Yamamoto, and traded for Mookie Betts, in the last year of his deal, and then extended him, signing Freddie Freeman, et cetera, et cetera. Those are things that, I think the what you can take from that is, if you're going to spend on free agents, spend on the top of the market. And, the Royals can't afford 4 or 5 $35 million a year free agents. They might be able to afford one, which is an interesting note when we move into the offseason, and there are at least the hint of rumors that the Royals might be considering getting into the bidding for someone like Kyle Tucker, right? Like, yes. Yeah. You know what? You're much less likely to regret signing a star free agent who in 5 years is declined to being a good but not star player anymore and making a lot of money, but is still playable, rather than, signing the, Hunter Renfroes of the world or whatnot, right? So that there is that lesson to be learned. But like you said, their stars carried them because they were a very top-heavy team this year. To the extent that they had additional depth, it is because they are still very, very good at player development. And on the pitching side this year, I mean, we've talked about this before, that the Dodgers do a good job of developing pitchers, but at the expense of their health. And so many of their pitchers, are really good until they're suddenly injured or whatnot. And you think of someone like, Emmett Sheehan, who was like a great pitcher, a great pitching prospect 2 years ago and was a very promising rookie, and then blew out his elbow and missed the next 2 years and just came back elite this year. And was actually very good for them down the stretch as a starter. The other thing you can take from the Dodgers is when you have as much depth in starting pitching as they have, don't be afraid to use that excess in the bullpen in October. Right. So when the Royals get to October, especially when you think about how deep they are in starting pitching, right? You think about how many times they went to, not just in Game 7, they went to obviously Yamamoto, but also, Blake Snell was in there, and obviously Clayton Kershaw came out, the bullpen for one batter in this series, and Emmett Sheehan was constantly pitching out of the bullpen. They had a very weak bullpen, but they were able to use their excess starting pitching in the bullpen. If the Royals get to October, as soon as next year, do you move, Noah Cameron or someone, your fifth starter into a prominent bullpen role? I think that's a lesson you can definitely take if you're the Royals. But yeah, I do feel like there's a lot more to learn from the Blue Jays situation.
And if you look at the Game 7 lineup, I'm trying to look at what the cost was. Okay, Tommy Edman was $13 million. Rojas was $5 million, and Enrique Hernandez was $6.5 million. Kind of shocking that's. I mean, they're not league minimum players,
right?
But it's like that's what they were counting on down at the bottom of their order, So that to me was, it's like, okay, you spent all this money and there wasn't enough left over for like $10 million. Like you'd expect to, like, okay, $90 million minimum for the lineup because everybody's going to make at least $10 million in the lineup, right? Not the case. There's still, Adam Frazier-esque guys that are in the lineup for the Dodgers.
But this is what's going to happen, even if you have a $500 million payroll or whatever, when you don't have rookies and pre-ARB eligible players from your own organization. I mean, the one guy in there, in their lineup most of the season who fits that is Andy Pages, who had a really good season and then was just god-awful in the playoffs to the point where he was benched, and then comes in because they need his arm in a dire situation, bases loaded, one out. They bring him in the bottom of the ninth in case there's a medium depth fly ball. He could throw the winning run out at the plate, and then ends up making an incredible defensive play with his glove. But he's really the only guy in their lineup who's not making market value or close to it. Right. I mean, all the other guys, Max Muncy is an incredible development story. We can talk about hitter development. That's the other thing the Dodgers have done well and the Blue Jays have done well. But he's been with that team for a long time. He's making, market value. He was signed as a free agent. Teoscar Hernandez, same thing. Like, he's been a good player, but they signed him as a free agent. If you can't develop talent from within, you could easily spend $200+ million on your lineup alone and still have weak spots in it.
Yeah. One thing I do look at is, like, when I see, like, okay, Shohei Ohtani was the star, played like the star. Vlad Guerrero Jr. is the star, played like the star. The Royals have that guy in Bobby Witt Jr., right? And they're hoping that Jack Caglione and Carter Jensen, maybe one of those, will become another one. And they have the ace when you look at the pitching, and they have the depth of starting pitching. To your point about using starters as relievers, they've got the depth. I don't know that they're as top end, but Cole Reagans is as good as anybody that's going out there. So if he's healthy,
exactly.
Like, that's
they have the top end talent, which is
it's
one of the reasons we're so optimistic about if they can just get to the playoffs. And I mean, I think that bore out to some degree last year when, despite, not having any offense at all, they're still able to win their first round matchup. The thing with Bobby Witt, and I'm spitballing this, so I'm not going to stand by this necessarily, but it is now 2 years in a row, it feels like, where he has fallen off in September. And then, in October in the playoffs last year, he was not elite. It does make me wonder, does he just need a few more days off during the season? Because, you look, Vlad Guerrero, he played 156 games. I think he's a first baseman, right? Shohei Ohtani's played 158 games and he's a unicorn, but like he's a DH when he's not pitching. And you could argue that like that 18-inning game where he got on base 9 times, the next day he was not as sharp as he normally is on the mound, and gave up. I guess he gave up 2 runs while he's in the game and 2 more scored after he left. But the point is, even the most elite athletes in the world, maybe a couple more days of rest for Bobby Witt would be helpful. If you want him to be a force in October, you just don't want him to be completely ground down. And playing shortstop is a much more, much more exertion at that position. So that's one thing, something to at least, put a pin in and come back to next September.
We want to talk about some signings. Anything else you want to add about the World Series?
Well, the Blue Jays, I mean, to me, there's a lot you can take from the Blue Jays. The one thing I want to point out, we talked about this earlier, but like the Blue Jays and Royals were absolutely lapped the field when it comes to making contact at the plate, right? The Royals and Blue Jays both struck out fewer than 1,100 times. Every other American League team struck out 1,300 or more times. The difference is the Blue Jays made extreme contact without doing it at the expense of power or plate discipline, taking pitches. They finished tied for 6th in the American League in home runs with 191. The Royals finished dead last, right? The Royals, in addition to being dead last in, fewest strikeouts, they had the fewest walks. The Blue Jays had the 3rd most walks in the American League and the 2nd fewest strikeouts. Like they had by far the best strikeout to walk ratio of any team in the American League. That's how you get to 2nd in the league in runs scored. Whatever they're doing in terms of their offensive philosophy, right? Especially with the Royals looking for, a few new hitting coaches, like I'm curious what they're doing in Toronto, because the Royals obviously have a philosophy that prioritizes making contact. And there's some evidence that, especially in the postseason, teams that don't strike out a lot do better than expected in postseason series. I mean, the Blue Jays came very, very close, obviously, to winning the World Series with their contact heavy approach. But you can't do that you can't just say, well, we're just making contact with a team of 9 Luis Ariases, right?
Right.
You can make contact, but if you're not hitting for any power and swinging at everything, you're not going to have a good offense. The Blue Jays have figured out in a way, they kind of reminded me of the 2015 Royals in the sense that that's a team that was extreme contact, but also could hit for power and get on base a little bit, and a lot of doubles. But even better, like the gold standard here is really like the 2019 Astros that had like the fewest strikeouts and the most home runs in the American League. Just an absolute dominant offensive lineup. The Blue Jays weren't quite that good, but they clearly were doing something right with not letting a propensity for contact lead to slower bat speed or whatever. Not selling out for power when you can't. That's something I'd like to see the Royals take a lesson from.
I'm with you. Dodgers hit 244 home runs. The Blue Jays hit 191. The Royals hit 159. That's like, well, we hit more doubles. Well, the Royals did hit more doubles than the Dodgers, right? Dodgers 257, but the Blue Jays 294, Royals 292. Mm-hmm. So the Blue Jays hit just as many doubles, and they had the homers. And then you mentioned the walks. I mean, I think that is the thing that's still there. We talked about it with Daniel Mack last week. 580 walks for the Dodgers, 520 walks for the Blue Jays, 435 for the Royals. I mean, that is a lot of base runners that you're on the negative side.
That right there is why 85 walk difference between the Royals and the Blue Jays. You give the Royals 85 more walks, no joke, they make the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's that much of that's that important. So hopefully they can take some lessons there. The one other thing I want to point out, both of these teams are good at that the Royals are not. Like the Royals have done an incredible job when it comes to taking pitchers from other organizations and making them better. Obviously, we talked about that. There really isn't that on the hitting side. You look at the Blue Jays, Ernie Clement was like a nobody. He was, if I recall, waived by the A's. I think he was the Guardians first. I think he was released by the Guardians or traded from the Guardians. No, he was waived and then released by the A's. The Blue Jays signed him, and immediately he went from like a marginal hitter in AAA to like hitting 350 in AAA. They brought him to the major leagues. He became a regular at age 28, and this year broke the all-time major league record for most hits in a single postseason. Right? Nathan Lucas, who was batting second for these Blue Jays, drafted by the Indians, traded for a minor trade by them to the Rays, and then designated for assignment. He was signed as a minor league free agent by the Blue Jays a couple years ago, made it to the majors at 28, and was good enough to be in their lineup and, was a league average hitter this year. The Royals, that's the one thing they have not shown an ability to take other teams' rejects and turn them into quality hitters. Every now and then they'll have it from within the organization. Whit Merrifield and, Freddie Fermin obviously were late bloomers, but like that, it's another example of why they need to revamp things on the hitting side. If they do, like they've done on the pitching side, because they can match up with these two organizations on the pitching side, beat for beat. Like for every, the Blue Jays signed Kevin Gossman after one good year, and he's been great for them. The Royals did the same thing with Seth Lugo. I mean, like there's on the pitching side, I don't know if there's much to learn. Maybe that the importance of the splitter is really making a comeback. And between Gaussman and Trey Savage, the Blue Jays used that splitter to perfection. This
every Japanese pitcher uses,
and exactly, and every Jap. And I was thinking, I was like, can you think of a Royals pitcher who uses a splitter? It's the one thing I've been. And again, no disrespect to what the Royals are doing on the pitching side; they're doing amazing. But I'm like, I don't actually I can think of anybody who really throws a quality splitter. That's just something. Keep that in the back of your mind, Zach and Brian, when you're like, evaluating a pitcher's repertoire and what you can do to add a pitch or something. The splitter is a very underrated pitch, and there may even be another level of improvement the Royals can do on the pitching side.
Yeah, I like that. All right, let's take a break. You're going to hear from our friends at Northland Injury Law, Italian Delight, and of course, Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty, Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Italian Delight was the first restaurant to bring true New York-style pizza to Kansas City almost 50 years ago. They sell whole pies or pizza by the slice, or enjoy their classic strombolis, calzones, and sausage rolls. Sandwich lovers, check out their lineup of hot and cold subs, the combo, the meatball, or the Philly cheesesteak, just to name a few. And don't forget the pasta. Their famous lasagna and classic chicken Alfredo always hit the spot. If you're hungry for lunch, check out their daily lunch specials, starting at under $10. Italian Delight can even cater your next work function or party. Dine in, carry out, or delivery, it's Italian Delight. Located just 3 minutes east of Kansas Speedway at 8145 State Ave in KCK. Check out the menu and order online at ItalianDelightKS.com. Kansas City's own Italian Delight. Northland Injury Law, Kansas City's Google 5-star rated personal injury lawyers, serving KC for more than 40 years, voted Kansas City's #1 accident lawyers, helping people with serious injuries from car accidents, work accidents, falls, and other personal injuries. Northland Injury Law doesn't get paid unless they get money for their client. Don't wait, get compensated now. If you have a case, text HURT to 22222. That's HURT to 22222, or call 816-400-HURT. That's 816-400-4878. The choice of a lawyer is an important one and should not be based solely upon advertisements. All right, Rany, let's talk a little bit about who should be signed, locked up. We're not really going to get into the free agents as of yet because we've got some more time and, frankly, more shows to do between now and spring training. So we'll kind of save, our free agent list, which we always love doing, for a little bit later on. But in-house, right? I know we've talked about it. I've talked about it with Les and David, Michael Garcia, Vinny Pasquantino. Those are the two homegrown guys that immediately come to mind. Where do you sit? I think a lot of people would like to know, where do you sit on whether or not they should be signed? Should they be marketed for trades? If they are signed, what kind of contract? What's your overall thought, at least on those two guys?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think both players should be the top of the list for long-term extensions. Obviously, it depends on the details, the years, the money, the options, etc. But as somebody who was a Michael Garcia fan before this season when he broke out, I think what we saw from him this year is mostly for real, right? And he contributes in so many ways with that glove, the position, the fact that he's not going to be a 40 home run a year guy, but 16 homers, 5 triples, 39 doubles, that's legit pop, right? Which will keep pitchers honest and force them to take him seriously, which also he has the plate discipline. Like quietly, Michael had 62 walks this season. Did he lead the team? Yeah. Michael Garcia led the team in walks. Like he is as complete a hitter as anybody in this organization. He's basically, 85% of Bobby Witt. And 85% of Bobby Witt is an amazing player. So I think both of them. And then Vinny finally, stayed healthy. In his numbers, if you take out April, he looks like a stud. Obviously, you can't take out 1 month, especially when it was a terrible month. But like he did essentially what we thought he would be. He was an above average hitter at first base, but he was basically a league average first baseman. And they're both young enough that I'm very comfortable keeping them in the fold for at least the next 3 years. Right now, Michael Garcia, you have under club control for 4 years, ages 26 through 29. Whereas Vinny, you have for 3 years, ages 28 to 30. So Michael is the more obvious candidate. He is the kind of guy where I would be comfortable giving him, like when you sign a guy to a long-term extension, what he gets out of it is obviously guaranteed money. And I usually getting at least a year beyond his the club control guaranteed. So in other words, you have him for 4 years right now. You need to give him at least 5 years guaranteed. So he's because that fifth year, you're paying him essentially market rate, 20, 25 million. So he's essentially set for life. What you're getting in return is cost certainty for those first 5 or 6 years. But also, ideally, you're getting that club option afterwards so that if he is as good as you think he is, and you're basically, by giving him this contract, you are giving him a show of faith that we believe that you are a great player. And if he is as good as you think he is, you will be able to get him at slightly below market value for an additional year or two. So to me, I'm very comfortable giving him 5 years guaranteed, maybe even 6, because that takes you through your age 31. And we talk about how 32 is the cliff for a lot of guys. But you could have him for 6 years to ages 26 through 31. I'd be happy to guarantee that if you're able to get ideally 2 options beyond that. So for ages 32 and 33, you can keep him at, and we're not, it's not going to be a bargain necessarily. It's going to be $20, $25 million potentially. But if he's as good a player then as he is now, with where the market will be then, that's probably a significant discount. So to me, Michael is a pretty straightforward yes. Vinny, the concern is just that because he's a little bit older, he plays a less important defensive position, that, the urgency to sign him maybe is a little bit less. But I'd probably still do the same thing. I'd probably give him 4 years, which is, ages 28 through 31. Again, if you can get a year or two beyond that as an extension, obviously, I think he offers value above and beyond what he does on the field. There are a lot of first basemen in the league who can hit almost as well as him. Very few of them are doing like interviews on MLB Network in the middle of the World Series because he's such a personable guy, and I don't think that's not like just, fakery. Like he's very well respected in the clubhouse. He set the tone for this organization above and beyond what he's doing on the field. So I think he takes his craft very seriously. I thought, he did that. I don't know if you saw his segment with Mark DeRosa about like how to play first base and what Vladimir Guerrero does over at first base. But like you can see how much passion he has for the craft of just playing defense at first base. And quietly to me,
we heard that when he joined us here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. Like he talked about the pride he takes in that.
Absolutely. And the numbers don't reflect it. And we talked about that too, like first base defensive numbers. He felt like they're bullshit, and he might have a point because the first base defense is very difficult to measure. But I mean, I feel like this year, like the flexibility he showed and like reaching for balls that were, thrown by his infielders and stretching and doing the splits, like he looked like a better defensive player now at age 27 than he did when he came up when he was 24. So I think that like there's going to be, the work ethic is there, that he's not likely to fall apart in the next 3 or 4 years for sure. So I would be comfortable very much so with both of these guys getting extensions. And I think the Royals, they're trying to build that kind of atmosphere in Kansas City with these guys that, if you fall in love with one of our players, he's going to be around a while. So I would be surprised and frankly disappointed if at least one of them, and if really not both of them, are signed to a long-term extension between now and opening day.
I'm not going to be I do want to. The one thing I would say that needs to be kept in mind is like if you're going to play by the math, like they're going to be moving players. Like so, like the idea of like, oh, you got to be able to count on that you're going to have these guys to root for. No, you need to be able to count on that they're going to be a contending team, right? But I think part of what I would say is that signing them is great. They're here longer in Kansas City, but it also signing them oftentimes makes them more attractive via the trades.
Sure.
Right. So, I mean, it's not to say that you sign them. Like, I think it's important not to just have a blanket no trade clause.
Right.
Because if you have a blanket no trade clause and you're contending, the player's going to be like, no, I'm not going anywhere. Now, if you're losing, then they'll usually waive it. Right. But I think it's going to be important that with this, if you got to pay a few more bucks to make sure that you can still be flexible and move these guys, you need to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a good point. I think that they're going to still remain transactional. I think it's unlikely that you trade your core foundational guys. And if you do that, I'd much rather trade pitching because pitching is much more unpredictable anyway. But yes, just because you sign these guys should not limit your flexibility in terms of making moves that help your team.
I want to ask you about one more older guy, and then we'll talk about maybe not some of the other guys aren't necessarily young, but who else they should sign. But I want to ask you about Mike Yastrzemski because the Royals still do have, like, I think 5 more days, even though today or tomorrow is today, as we sit here on a Sunday, is the day that free agency begins, I think.
Right. And you have 5 days before
5-day exclusive negotiating window. Right. So should they be getting a deal done with Yastrzemski? My assumption is that they've gone down that road. They've had that conversation and it hasn't been fruitful. Maybe not. Maybe you need a deadline to get it done. It is in this time period that they got the deal done with Michael Wacha. So if that's
a good point.
If that's going to happen, this would seem to be the time for it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would be in favor of it. Look, I mean, we've talked about this multiple times on the show that like the switch that seemed to be flipped in terms of their walk rate and plate discipline in the second half of the season really corresponded to the day they acquired Mike Yastrzemski more than anything else, like more than any necessarily stylistic change in terms of their hitting approach. It was just bringing in a guy who knew how to do it already. And maybe, he pointed the way for the other guys, but like he was a very patient hitter. He also had a lot of pop at a position they really need. So I would like to see him signed. I think the problem is they don't want to give him 2 years guaranteed. He's going to be 35 years old. In fact, he actually turned 35 in August. And I get it. Like, the second year, how likely is he going to be a really good player, 36, 37 years old? Seems unlikely. Yeah. Maybe you just bite the bullet, though, and know that if you get one good year out of him next year, even if you're paying him a little more on, than you want in the second year, you get that value next year. So I'm still reasonably optimistic he will be back. Sometimes the guy just wants to see what his market value is and basically has told the Royals, let me see what I'm worth. But like all things equal, if you guys match what I can get somewhere else, I'll come back because I like my time here. And I think he did. So I'm hopeful that they will sign him. I think the need is acute and he fit the Royals very well. And 2 years is still not a huge commitment.
I think this is the best chance to get him signed, but I don't think if he gets the free agent market that it's necessarily over because I don't know that the free agent market is going to swoop in with big offers, right? Like I think he may be disappointed and like all the clubs that he might be like, well, let me see if any of the clubs that were in the playoffs want me and they're offering 1 year or they're not offering at all. And it may be like, okay, I took a quick look. Let's get back to what was that offer. I actually think this is one that you don't just completely take him off the board if he doesn't sign in the next 5 days. Who else do the Royals consider?
In terms of free agents or just in terms of guys?
No, not free agents. In terms of like locking up.
Okay. To me, I mean, there's a lot of guys you can talk about.
Really, I think there's 3 you can talk about.
Okay. Well, there's 3, but I mean, we'll save the most interesting one for the end here. Bubic is obviously the one they have to make a big decision on. And I just worry that nobody knows exactly what his health is right now. He's only a year away. I think it's going to be hard to come up with a contract structure that is fair to him and also protects the Royals in the event that he can't stay healthy and has to move back to the bullpen long term, or becomes a guy who's only available for 100, 110 innings a season, something along those lines. So
agreed. What it would take for him to sign, you don't want to give him, and what he would want from you, you're not willing to give. Like, there's not, the risk is, he risks so much by signing whatever the Royals would give him right now on what his upside will be if he comes back and performs well for 150 innings next year. He's got a massive contract, and the Royals can't afford to throw a mostly massive contract at him. I don't think there's any way that gets done. None. The question about Chris Bubich is, are they going to trade him?
Right, exactly. To me, that's much more likely that if once he establishes he's healthy, because again, everyone wants to make sure he's on the mound. So I would not surprise me if we don't see a trade there until like mid-March or something, like after spring training is in effect and he's been on the mound a few times.
But let me be clear, he is one of the three. I've only got three, and he's one of them.
Okay.
But so I would look at it, and if he shocks you and is like, "No, I love it here," like let's do something that is all options based upon innings and all that. Okay, you're gonna have to get real creative, and I don't see that happening. So, but I would explore it. It's not going to happen. We move on. Okay, next.
All right. Well, very briefly, I just want to mention a few guys I'm not considering. Like, I know there are people talking about like Salvador Perez, and it's like he might get an extension, but to me, it's not that interesting. Like, I just think he's not going to play for another team other than the Royals between now and the end of his career.
Yeah.
Like, whether he gets an extension now or they just let him play, like that'll get resolved. I'd be shocked if that ends poorly.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't even think about his name, and that should be pointed out, because I expect them to kind of either do some kind of rolling thing or each year, 1 year. I'm with you. So that's a good thing to bring up. Who else is out?
Kyle Isbell, like, he's been a very valuable player for the organization. He's only 2 years away from free agency. Like, now might be the time, but like, he's going to be 29 years old. You have him for ages 29 and 30. And unlike the other guys we talked about, Garcia and Vinny, like Kyle Isbell at 31, I'd rather just take it year by year. I don't think you're going to like save a ton of money by getting him signed long-term. If he continues to do what he's doing, like, could you sign him when he's a free agent on a year-by-year basis? Absolutely. I think he's been a great role player for this team, but he's not long-term contract material.
And defense ages fast. So,
well, exactly. I want him to prove to me after the age of 30. Like, it's shockingly, if you look around the league, it's actually shocking how few center fielders are in their 30s. Like, even 30, 31. There just aren't a lot of center field,
because they used to stay out there off their reputations, and then
we couldn't measure
quantifying him, and quantifying the analytics. They're like, wait a minute, this guy sucks out there. What are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, Ken Griffey Jr., who was a legit, like, just elite defensive center fielder in his 20s, was just, I mean, not to be mean, he was kind of bad as a defensive center fielder in his 30s, and it's just age gets to us all. Could he still be valuable in a corner spot defensively? Yes, but then the offensive requirements go up, and it's just like, again, you might still want him around. I just don't think you need to get a long-term deal. So that leaves two young guys. Well, technically three. Actually, I'll mention him here too. Noah Cameron, because you want to get guys when they're fresh out of the minor leagues. Maybe you can get a better deal. But pitchers, in his case, you have him for 6 more years. Like, is Noah Cameron the kind of pitcher you're going to give a guarantee of 6 years or more to? No, you're not. Like, no pitcher. I'm not sure any pitcher in baseball you really want to sign beyond 6 years. But it's certainly, maybe Paul Skeens. You do it for that. I don't think you're doing that for Noah Cameron. It's not no fault of his. It's just the nature of the position is, if you got a guy already locked up essentially for 6 years, there's no reason to extend that. So that gets us to our two guys who, two hitters who made their debuts this year, right? Jack Caglione. Let's start with him. I'm always in favor, generally speaking, of signing rookies to long-term deals, because the money involved, the savings if they turn into a star, is so huge compared to the downside if they turn out to be, a Will Myers type where they're okay, but they're never what you really thought. Like, yeah, you might overpay a little, but you might underpay a lot. So I'm always in favor of it. I just think that after the season he had, I'm not sure you can come up with a number at this point, a contract that satisfies both sides. And I think there's no urgency whatsoever. Like, give it a year. Let's make sure he can prove that he can make that transition to the major leagues and if it turns out he's a 40 home run hitter next year and his price goes through the roof, well, then maybe you just go year by year with him, and you've got him for 5 more years after next year. But I think it's unlikely you're going to get a deal done with him.
I think it's a show of hands. Who believes in him? Who knows this guy's going to be, 30 plus, right? Like, to me, this is like Bobby Witt Jr.'s first year, but worse.
Right, exactly.
Like, there's no way his agents are going to let him sign, because whatever the offer is way less than if he proves himself. And so I think you have to come back. If they'd have signed him to a deal before he ever got to the bigs and he had this start, I wouldn't be that panicked.
Right.
But now that you've seen that taste, you don't have to give it to him. And you've also, gone down this path with Bobby Witt Jr. So I agree. So that leaves us with
This is the one. I mean, I don't want to say nothing would make me happier, but few things would make me more excited about the future of the Royals this offseason than the news that they had signed Carter Jensen to just an absolutely mammoth 8, 9, 10-year contract. To me, he checks off every box. If you believe in this guy, and I don't want to put too much stock in his major league numbers in 20 games, right? And that's the danger, is that you get a little ahead of your skis here because he looked like, a Hall of Famer for 20 games. But he's 21 years old, 22 years old, barely 22. He plays a key defensive position. He hit in the minors. He continued to improve throughout his minor league days. He got to the major leagues. He's going to be probably a top 50 prospect in all of baseball. And I think he's frankly underrated in the sport because he's a little bit of a late bloomer, because he's always been young for his levels. And then you throw in the fact that he's from Kansas City, right? That's not a reason to sign him, but it might be a reason for him to take a contract to know that he can play for his hometown team. And if you give him, I'm just throwing this wild numbers, but 10 years, $100 million, or 9 years, $100 million. I think about, was it Corbin Carroll who got a long-term deal, right out of the minor leagues with the Diamondbacks? I think it was 8 years and $111 million or something like that. And, it looks like an absolutely fantastic deal for the Diamondbacks. And yet who's making a mistake when you're 21, 22 years old and getting a guaranteed $100 million? That's the kind of deal that can be great for the player and also great for the organization, because $100 million guaranteed versus, let's say a 50-50 chance of making $300 million. The math says you take the 50-50 chance, but you're going to enjoy that first $100 million a hell of a lot more than you enjoy the second $200 million. So there is a path here. If the Royals believe in Carter Jensen for the long term, and 8, 9, 10 years, he'll be 30, 31 at the older. You don't have to worry about him aging out of being a good player. You just have to worry about him actually being that good player and then having the work ethic to maintain that. What a powerful statement that would be to say, just as Salvador Perez solved the Royals' catching situation for the last 15 years, we have his replacement who's going to solve that problem for the next 10 years already in-house. That would be a huge, huge statement by the Royals, that they're committed to paying money to keep their stars around. And we believe that Carter Jensen is a star.
Yeah. I agree. I think that's the guy that you would investigate. Do you think they're going to do it? I don't. I think they'll want to see more, but I think this is the one that they could get creative. And again, if you put your hand, show of hands, are you confident this guy's the real deal?
Right.
And we're not going to get burned? Does your hand go up?
Does my hand go up?
Yes.
Based on what I know, yes, but I'm not privy to the kind of information the Royals have. They know the player better.
Yes, that's the kind of thing they'll do. Daniel Mack would have his say and weigh in.
Exactly.
You go there, but the early returns are better. He took to the big leagues better than Jack Caglione.
Right.
You just doesn't mean Jack Caglione's done it. It doesn't mean Carter Jensen's going to the Hall of Fame. There's no doubt the early returns are. He handled it better.
Right. To me, the biggest issue is not, I think his plate approach, everything at the plate, I think I was very, very happy with. The question, if the Royals, the number one question I think they would have internally before doing this is, do we think he actually is a major league catcher? Right. We do not want an MJ Melendez situation. If it turns out he's terrible at framing, and they have information that I'm not privy to. So, but I've, generally by this point, by the time a guy makes it to the major leagues, you have at least some idea of whether his defensive reputation behind the plate is overrated or not. I haven't heard anything to tell me that Carter Jensen is not a catcher long term.
Right.
You know, I don't know. I'm not saying he's Yadi or Molina, but like, you know, if he's an average defensive catcher, and especially with, you know, automatic balls and strikes coming in slowly over time, like the impact of framing is likely to go down over time. So he doesn't have to be a great framer. He just has to not be terrible at it. But that would be the biggest holdup. And if the Royals think he can catch long term, like you, I think it's unlikely. I wouldn't bet on it happening. I'd give it a 20% chance. But you know, 20% chances happen sometimes. So that would definitely make me very excited about the long-term future, though, if they pull it off.
All right, Randy, let's wrap with this. You're going to fantasy camp. You're going to play baseball.
Play in quotation marks. I don't know if you can call what I'm going to do play. So, as you know, Soren, I turned 50 this summer. And, you know, that's one of those milestone moments. Don't want to dwell on that too much, except to say that for my 50th birthday, my wife and daughters surprised me with a gift. And that gift was they're sending me to Royals fantasy camp for the first time. And when I opened up the package, which is basically a letter from the Royals confirming that I'm going, I guess the look on my face was less than the, pure unmitigated joy my wife and children were expecting, because their first question was, this is what you want, right? And I guess the look on my face was like equal parts excitement and, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? All right. Abject terror was certainly a part of that, because after 30 years of criticizing professional athletes for their ability on the field, now suddenly I got to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to be out on a field with, I think, 96 campers who all pay for the privilege of getting a locker in the Royal Spring Training Complex in Surprise, Arizona, and going out on the field. And, you know, these guys range from their 30s. I've been told there are people in their 80s who come to play. And instead of people like me criticizing professional athletes for their play, those professional athletes are going to be making fun of me, because the coaches for the 8 teams that they divide us into are all former Royals players. And I will say, my first fear, the number one thing that went through my mind as a downside to this was, oh my God, who are the coaches? And are any of those coaches guys that I have said truly vicious and vile things about at some point in my life? Because if one of the Royals coaches, celebrity coaches, was, I don't know, Unieski Betancourt,
right,
there would have been potential ass beating of severe proportions when I got down to Surprise, and I probably would have deserved it. Like, if Jordan Lyles was one of the coaches, it might have been awkward. You know, if Cal Eldred was there, might have been a little bit awkward. So I am pleased to report. Well, for one thing, I'm very pleased to report. So the guy who's in charge of the camp on the baseball side, baseball operations, is Kaufman Corner's very own Les Norman.
That's right.
So I was very happy to hear that. And I called Les almost immediately after this, and he talked me off the ledge and reassured me that, you know, the goal here is to have a good time. He gave me I'm not going to name all the coaches here, but like, he gave me the names of the players who are going to be there. And out of the 16 coaches, like 6 or 7 of them are in the Royals Hall of Fame. Like, without giving too specific, like, there are some good players there. And even the guys who are not, like if you look back at the 2004 Royals, they're the 3 best players on that team. Like Mark Tian, he was on this show, right? We interviewed Mark Tian. He's one of the coaches. I'm like, I love Mark Tian.
Yeah.
Right. There are players on this team, even though the role players, I'm like, I'm sure if you found a 1998 mint edition of Baseball Prospectus and opened it to the Royals chapter, I might have said something marginally critical, but fortunately those are hard to find. They're out of print, so hopefully nobody will find anything truly terrible that I said. But
you want me to go get it off my bookshelf right now? Send it to the fellas.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure you will. I don't have to worry. You probably already have. They're gonna be waiting for me at off the plane with a copy of all the comments that I've said.
Yeah.
So hopefully that part will be okay. But I deserve whatever criticism I've earned. And then, yes, I'm going to be on the field and muffing ground balls and swinging and missing at 60-mile-an-hour fastballs. Like, it's going to be ugly. And I'm sure you guys will enjoy mocking me mercilessly for it. So.
I think it's going to be great. And I won't mock you because I know how bad I would suck. Like, I had a hard time hitting a softball lobbed at me, let alone a hard ball thrown with intent. I don't care how softly thrown in with intent, still thrown with intent, as opposed to here, hit it, fatty. And I was no good hitter when it came to that. So you will get nothing but appreciation and admiration for you to going out and doing it. I think it's great.
Well, I mean, look, what everybody says from Les on down, everything I've heard is the number one priority is don't hurt yourself.
Yes.
Right.
Don't get cute sliding. Don't get cute with explosive moves because you're not ready for it.
Fantasy Camp is brought to you by Advil and Aleve, and I will be taking. I'm going to have an entire bottle of probably both with me. But yeah, I've bought all the equipment I can get, and if I can't play good, at least I can look good.
There you go. I like that.
So, and there will be there may or may, I'm not going to confirm or deny the presence of video afterwards, a highlight video again, another also in quotation marks of my play. So I'm sure you and the guys at the station will enjoy thoroughly enjoy watching that. And
well, we do want the video because there'll be some form of it that will become a part of the Open.
Oh God.
It might just be you
pressure.
in the uniform.
I'm just in uniform.
That might be it. Just, you walking out to hit. Like, if there's nothing worth, listen, the idea is to get people to want to watch. So we will put only things that make you look good, right? Like, I don't want people to watch the intro. Somebody tuning in for the first time watches the intro is like, this dumbass is the guy who's doing it. So we're not going to have a comedy of errors running every time we do the podcast.
Do you remember the guy Larry Bud Melman on the David Letterman show, Calvin DeForest?
Yeah, the old guy. Yep.
So if you recall, during the strike 30 years ago, right? There was a moment where the major league teams, as a negotiating player, were going to use replacement players,
right,
to replace and those, they actually opened spring training camps with replacement players. The quality of play was so bad in spring training, because I think they sold tickets to fans to go watch this in March, that it probably had something to do with making the owners more willing to negotiate to end the strike, because it was such an embarrassment that they were going to play an actual season with these guys. They made a commercial. I cannot remember the company. I'm not sure I can find it on YouTube, where they had Larry Bud Melman, like in a commercial, pretending to be one of these replacement players and talking about, like, my time my time in spring training was very educational. And it's basically like a highlight video of him, like, making the worst baseball plays known to man. And every time I think about this video they're going to make, I'm just like, it's going to look like that. So, it's probably available somewhere on YouTube, but
I'm looking at it right now.
I just want to be better than Larry Bud Melman in a commercial, mocking Major League Baseball. So hopefully it will go okay. Hopefully I'll come back in one piece. I won't be just like holding my back for every episode for the rest of the winter. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing, to having stories, to meeting all the other campers. I mean, of the 96 campers, I'm one of only 9, I believe, who are rookies who've never done this before, which just tells you the popularity of it, that like 90% of these guys come back year after year. So
yeah,
we'll find out. But it's, it seems only fair after all these years of talking about how easy it must be to play Major League Baseball, that I'm going to finally get a taste of my own medicine.
There you go. I love it. I think it's going to be great. Listen, also great are our sponsors. If you love the Kaufman Corner podcast, support our great sponsors like Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. I'm not sure. I think you can still get the seal coating done, but with the weather turning, with the temperatures dropping, that's going to be going away soon. No commissions, in-house crews, free consultations. Every project comes with a written warranty. One contractor, all things parking lot, Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Our friends at Italian Delight, 50 years ago, they were the first to bring true New York-style pizza to Kansas City, whether it's their strombolis, their calzones, their wonderful pizzas, their subs, their lasagna. It's an absolutely wonderful place. Lunch special starting at $10. 8145 State Ave, that's just a few minutes east of the Speedway. Find them online at ItalianDelightKS.com. And, of course, Northland Injury Law. For more than 40 years, voted Kansas City's #1 accident lawyers, helping people with serious injuries, car accidents, work accidents, falls, other personal injuries. Northland Injury Law doesn't get paid unless they get money for their client. Don't wait. Get compensated now. Text HURT to 22222 if you've been hurt in any way, shape, or form, or call 816-400-HURT. For Fantasy Camper, Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much.